This video is an introduction to the philosophical discussion surrounding well-being. So let's ask, what is the good life? Let's imagine that you are nearing the end of your life, and in that moment, what kinds of things do you hope you could say were a part of your life? So is it having some significant achievement, meaningful relationships, happiness? So what does it take in order for us to say that we have a good life? And the significance of asking this question is that we don't want to wait until the end of our lives to figure out uh, those things that were good for us, that make for a good life. Because when you come to the end of your life, you might find that it's too late to get those things that make for a good life. So the philosophical search for well-being and what well-being means, how to get it, what's necessary in order for us to attain well-being, to have the good life, it has important consequences for us. This search is hopefully going to help us figure out what makes for a good life. So we want to keep in mind a few distinctions. So well-being, flourishing, and the good life are all terms used to refer to what makes our life a good one. So if you are reading anything within the philosophy of well-being literature, well-being, flourishing, the good life, and even happiness are all terms used to refer to the same concept. And that concept is what makes for a good life. And you also want to be careful about how the word benefit is used. So whatever makes our life go well, those things that make up a good life, those things are said to benefit us. And when we have those benefits, that means that our life has some degree of well-being. So in this question of what constitutes well-being, we're looking for those goods that make our life go well. And the goods that make our life go well are what's called intrinsic goods. Intrinsic goods are goods that we want for themselves. Having these goods means our lives are going well. So some candidates for what constitutes an intrinsic good are happiness, health, good relationships, attaining and accomplishing significant tasks within our lives, attaining knowledge. Those are the kinds of things that we might think are good in and of themselves for us to have. So there's discussion and debate about which goods actually make the list, but whatever we decide or argue for or figure out that the intrinsic goods are supposed to be, those are the things that we want to have in order to say that we have a good life, in order to say that our lives are going well. The other kind of good that we want to think about and keep in mind when considering discussions of well-being is the idea of instrumental goods. So instrumental goods are goods that we want because they get us closer to having the intrinsic goods that we really want. So you can think about instrumental goods as a kind of tool. And the tool that is an instrumental good is something that helps us to work towards attaining the intrinsic goods. So think about money. So they say money can't buy happiness, but if money turns out to be an instrumental good, it can get us closer to having those things that we think are intrinsic goods. Things like knowledge. It takes money to go to college. It takes money in order to achieve health. It takes money to have significant achievement in some ways. So an instrumental good is anything that gets us closer to having the intrinsic goods that we really want. So I want to point out that under intrinsic goods, I have put happiness, but then earlier I said that happiness can also be a synonym for the good life. That's also something you'll want to kind of flag for yourself as you're reading through any kind of well-being literature, is that there's two senses in which happiness is used. So like I said, happiness in the term of, in the sense of flourishing, any kind of flourishing, whatever we think that flourishing constitutes. So then there's happiness as a state of the state of, it could be something like a good feeling, a kind of pleasure that we feel or experience, a kind of satisfaction with something. And that is distinct. Those kinds of feelings or states of being, states of mind, are different from how flourishing, or I'm sorry, from how happiness is used as this synonym for well-being. So just keep in mind that sometimes happiness is meant to refer to flourishing or well-being, and then happiness is also used to refer to this feeling that we have when this feeling of pleasure that some people think that we have when we do in fact have flourishing or well-being. There's two main types of theories of well-being, and these are two broad categories. Just a heads up, some people are working on trying to combine elements of both theories. So the theories aren't going to be just objective or just subjective. You might have theories of well-being that say that there are both objective and subjective elements to well-being, but more on that in a second. An objective theory, you can think about this like the peas and carrots view of well-being. So what's good for you is good for you whether you desire that benefit or not. So objective theories are going to put forth intrinsic goods that they think you should have in your life, whether those things make you happy or not. So one example of this theory is Mill's version of hedonism. So what makes a life go well, according to Mill, is the amount of pleasure that it has in it. Now, Mill gets more technical, and the pleasure that he's talking about, it's multifaceted, multi-layered. So at the base level, you have good sensations, good feelings, a kind of feeling of satisfaction, but then you can also have a kind of deeper happiness that comes from the intellectual pursuits or intellectual pleasures. So what Mill is putting forward for us is that there are certain things that constitute our being happy. And if we don't have those things, we are not going to have well-being in our life. So for Mill, if we don't have certain kinds of pleasures, if we don't have intellectual pleasures, our life is not going as well as the life that has intellectual pleasure in it. The problem with this kind of objective theory is that it seems that in order for something to make you better off, in order for something to benefit you, you need to be importantly involved. So think about it this way. Let's say that what benefits you is significant relationships, right? But what if you don't care about having those deep, fulfilling, close friendships? So imagine someone named Hermit Hermie, but he has many friends. Hermie's natural inclination is just to stay home, do his own thing, hang out by himself, whatever that might be, read a book, watch his favorite Netflix show. But he knows, so he's read the literature on well-being. He knows that what's objectively good for him is to have significant relationships, but he doesn't care about having that many friends. Now, this person we might think is super far out there, but it seems like there's something importantly missing for Hermit Hermie. We're telling him to go out and to have close friendships, close relationships, to have this thing that's supposed to be good for him. But how can it be good for him if he doesn't really care about having that thing in his life? That seems very strange. So this leads some philosophers who work on well-being to turn to what's called subjective theories, one of the other main types of theories of well-being. So this broad category of theories says that for something to benefit you, you should have some kind of positive attitude towards it. So by positive attitude, I mean something like desire, approve of it, want it, make it, it's something that you want to attain long term. So for a subjective theory, what's important to remember here is that these theories hold that something's good for you only if you care about it. So one example of this kind of theory is the desire fulfillment theory. On this theory, something is good for you only if you attain the fulfillment of a desire. So more sharply, the desire fulfillment theory says that you are benefited when you achieve the fulfillment of your desires. So whatever that desire may be, you as the person whose well-being is in question get to set the desires that get fulfilled. So they're importantly your desires. But what's significant about this theory is that the desire fulfillment theory is that what benefits you is actually getting the fulfillment of that thing that you desired, actually attaining what you want. One of the problems with the subjective theories of well-being is that sometimes it seems like we just desire the wrong kinds of things. We want things that maybe just aren't good for us. So maybe someone has a desire to count blades of grass for the rest of their life. That's their deepest heart's desire. According to the desire fulfillment theory, as long as this person gets to count blades of grass for the rest of their life, they have a significant amount of well-being. They were able to fulfill their desires. But something strikes us as wrong about that. It seems like there are importantly things that we should care about. So it seems like we should care about having the right kinds of aims and objectives for our lives. And for some reason, it just doesn't seem like quite the right thing to set forth as your ultimate goal in life, use your deepest heart's desire to count blades of grass. It seems like we do need some kind of corrective element to prevent these very odd desires and even some morally reprehensible desires as counting towards something that's good. We don't want the fulfillment of morally reprehensible desires or of very strange desires, of desires that we intuitively think shouldn't benefit anyone, to actually benefit that person. So counting blades of grass, think about Ted Bundy. He got the fulfillment of his desires through murdering people. So in the case of psychopaths and sociopaths that have this kind of dysfunction of desires, the subjective theory is going to say that their life is going well for them to the extent that they have fulfillment of these bad desires, or what we would think are bad desires. But that kind of seems like the wrong answer to get. So these problems with these theories, it seems like the strength of one could counteract the weakness of the other. So it seems like the subjective theory needs a bit of an objective element to help us eliminate the possibility of certain rogue desires or bad desires. And the objective theory needs a certain kind of subjective element to it to capture what we think a theory of well-being should give us. If something's going to make us better off, we ought to care about it in a deep and important way. So some theorists, some philosophers who work on theories of well-being have put forth some theories that try to combine these two types of elements. So that concludes our brief overview of the types of theories of well-being that are on offer.